Welcome to another episode of Washington in Focus. I'm your host, Tim Klausner, with the Center Square's Western Washington correspondent, Spencer Pauly, here to talk about the city of Tacoma's budget woes. Despite just closing a $24 million general fund deficit, the city is already anticipating a roughly $15 million deficit across 2027 and 2028. And to help close that gap, they might raise taxes as soon as 2026, maybe in the next few weeks.
Mhm.
Spencer, you wrote a little bit about this. Why don't you tell us about this tax increase that the city council is now considering?
Sure. So Tacoma's in the beginning stages. They're actually set as we record this to talk later today about a proposed sales tax increase that was authorized by the state house. And now this generated revenue comes from a sales tax increase of 10 cents per $100 purchase, and it goes only towards public safety needs. Now, Tacoma is a little late to this based on my reporting, because I've talked about how Seattle has already approved its similar increase, King County as well, and even Bellingham, Renton, etc. So they're a little late to the party here.
Mhm.
And what this sales tax increase would do is raise their rate from 10.3 to 10.4% and generate about $7 to $7.5 million on an annual basis. Now, that will kind of chip at that structural deficit of $15 million set for 2027, the next time that Tacoma will consider a 2-year biennium budget. So because they're a little late to the party, if they adopt this increase by the end of the year, it would take effect about early April of 2026 instead of the beginning of the year. So that's where we're at right now. The city said that these increases, just because it's set for public safety needs, would go mainly to essential government programs, including the 911 response system, so that it don't make any cuts there if they feel they need to do so.
Yeah, you're saying that they're a little late to the party. I have seen quite a few jurisdictions statewide considering this tax. Some haven't adopted it, as you've said. And they
Mm-hmm.
were racing to do so because, like Tacoma, Seattle, Spokane, all these major cities across the state, they're grappling with budget deficits this year. And the legislature gave them this tool to close it. And I'll say this, without voter approval, the council doesn't need the
Yes.
voters to agree to this. They can just pass this tax. But the difference in this case is that you have like Bellingham, these other areas that you said passed it. They were doing this to close budget deficits or to fill in funding for 2026. They're looking ahead to 2027, 2028. So even if they pass this now and it doesn't take effect until April, I mean, that's still almost a whole year of revenue before they're anticipating these budget challenges. So that'll help cushion their landing a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the big thing here is that the council can do this without voter approval. If this went on the ballot and the voters said, no, we don't want this, the council would have no choice but to kind of trim spending. And that would come with consequences, some service level reductions. Yeah. But correct me if I'm wrong here. Did the voters not just reject another tax hike on the ballot for public safety not too long ago?
Yes, and in fact, in the past 2 years, voters have rejected two levy proposals. Most recently was the renewal of the city's streets levy, and then the one you're referring to is the fire and public safety levy that voters rejected as well. Now, when that bill was ultimately rejected by voters, I think it's important to note that proposition of opposers of the Proposition 1 said that the measure just allows for an annual tax bump of up to 6% all the way to 2030, and that this cost would just trickle down to renters if landlords then opt to raise rents. And that's where they're at here. And now I think it is important to note, like as you say, Tim, sales tax is one of the most regressive forms of taxing people. And so to be able to do this without voter approval is interesting to say the least, I guess, Tim. Obviously they want to reduce that deficit, and it seems like everyone's on the same page where it's like, we have to avoid making cuts to our departments. And so the only way to do that is by raising taxes when we can. And that's where we're at here now. Now, with the current trend of voters not wanting to raise, taxes, it shows that Tacoma residents are at a tight spot here where they're looking any way to save money, and they don't want to raise taxes, even if it is to fund public safety needs or to fund road maintenance. And so now Tacoma's at this point where it's like, well, if we can do it ourselves, it looks like we might do so. And that's where looks like it's heading up until the end of 2025.
Yeah, it's interesting to see this happening because, like I said earlier, all these major cities are grappling with budget deficits, raising taxes to fill them. Similar to like we saw last winter heading into 2025, we saw a lot of the same things. But last year heading into 2025, the state legislature was also grappling with a 12 to $16 billion deficit of its own that it needed to close. And this is one of the tools that they threw in there to do so. But in the sense, it was kind of like a delayed tax hike for everyone else because, again, the state legislature is anticipating another $2 billion deficit that they're getting ready to try to balance in January and February. But at the same time, you have this bill that they passed last year that now Tacoma can say, look, now we're anticipating a budget deficit. We're going to pass this. And it's right after the voters rejected two levies already. And the thing that I think is interesting with that fire levy that you spoke to, the voters rejected that. I looked it up. It was November 2024. So just over a year ago now. Baked into this House Bill 2015, this legislation that the city is going to use to raise taxes potentially, there's a provision in there, and I'll read directly from the bill report, says, if the city or county voters have rejected the imposition of the local criminal justice sales and use tax or the local public safety sales and use tax within the past 12 months, the city or county may not impose the new sales and use tax. So this program in specific, this 0.1% sales tax, had they floated this proposal back in September, legally they wouldn't have been able to pass it because the voters rejected another levy. Now we're looking at, just over a month past this sort of cap on them or barrier from them passing it. And now they're already floating the idea. I know we haven't really heard much from residents yet because it's coming up for a public hearing. I believe you said later today, Spencer, but it is quite interesting to see how they're finagling things. I'm really interested to see what will the voters say when this comes up at city council and they're given the opportunity to testify.
Yeah, and that's something I'll be looking forward to tonight's city council meeting. And another thing I should note, Tim, is they're also discussing changes to their landlord tenant bill that was approved by voters 2 years ago. Now, this was more so geared to helping tenants over landlords, which caused some issues, caused some legal troubles that the city is amidst. And, well, there is a 2-year restriction on any changes to voter approved levies or voter approved ordinances, I should say. And right now, Tacoma later today will vote on amendments to these landlord tenant code initiatives that really changes that. And they're allowed to do so now that it's been 2 years since that levy or that bill was approved in 2023. So another instance of Tacoma trying to get around these laws so that they can change it up.
It's a good example. Thank you for pointing that out, Spencer, because I mean, these rules are in place. Yeah, the rule says you can't do this within 12 months. In the instance that I was bringing up, 24 months in the instance you're bringing up. Yeah, they waited until afterwards, but they waited until right afterwards.
That's right.
They're respecting the voters up until the extent of the law. I looked at areas like Pasco. Pasco was considering a transportation benefit district in the last few months, and they could have raised the sales tax rate there just like this, without voter approval. And they caught a lot of flack from that when residents came up and testified. And the city council ultimately said, look, we understand we're grappling with budget woes, but we're not going to do it. We're going to respect our voters and just put it on the ballot and let them ultimately decide later on. So
a rare move in Washington, it seems like, Tim.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to see how each jurisdiction is grappling with this. But Spencer, we'll continue to keep our eyes on it. I'm sure you'll be covering this as the public hearing happens. And then potentially this tax is passed and the rate is raised to 10.4% in the city of Tacoma. But Spencer, thank you for covering this. And for anyone wanting to read the story, you can catch it at thecentersquare.com. Otherwise, thank you for joining us for another episode of Washington in Focus.